today, guys? Today I'm at Walton Glen Gorge, and while I was here at Walton Glen Gorge, I wanted to share with you guys some hopefully helpful tips for when you're doing landscape photography within a gorge. The first tip I wanted to share with you guys involves scale. Now, chances are when you're photographing the gorge and you want to include the whole gorge itself, you're going to want to go wide to include everything. But the problem when you go super wide is you kind of lose out on scale, and it's hard to show the true scale of the gorge, how deep or tall it is when you're out that wide. So what I would recommend to do is actually add a person or some sort of element that can show the scale between the gorge and that said element. Basically, you just want to include something that someone can decide on the scale and relate to so that they can truly understand how deep the gorge is or how tall the rocks are. It's important to note that with a wide angle lens, the further away you're going to leave the frame, the smaller you're going to appear within the frame. So in the case of photographing a gorge, that would work in your favor because you want the gorge to look as deep as possible and you want to show off the grand scale of the gorge itself. So the further you walk back, the smaller you're going to appear in the image. That's basically how it works. And like I mentioned earlier, it doesn't actually have to be a person. That's just what I'm using in this instance. There's actually a tree that's blown out in the highlights up there, and something like that would work even because, you know, everyone knows generally how big a tree is. So seeing the two walls coming in beside it and towering over it, they can immediately go, oh, okay, that gorge is really deep, or it's at least bigger than a tree. So that's my first tip, which is basically just focus on scale so that you can really portray the grand size of the gorge and how big the gorge is itself. Okay, so my second tip has to do with light. And that's firstly, you want to go out on a day that it's overcast light. Basically, so you have that nice soft ambient light that's lighting everything evenly. You don't want to go out and shoot on a bluebird day where you have harsh sunlight directly coming into the gorge and blowing out highlights. When you're at the bottom of the gorge, chances are there isn't anything directly above you. There might be some foliage or trees, but when you look directly up, it's going to be a big open space for that ambient light to just pour down in. So knowing that, you can use that ambient light to light up your foreground elements, which in my case here, there's a lot of really nice rocks, and that ambient light is just showcasing them really well in the foreground. So just use that ambient light to your advantage. That soft overcast light could also be lighting some foliage or something that's growing along the sides of the gorge, and you can really use that to light up the subject really well. At the ends of each gorge as well, chances are there's going to be ambient light reflecting into the gorge, so you can also use that. My third tip for photographing within a gorge is to use the dark gorge walls as a backdrop to separate your subject or whatever characters you want to separate. Much like how I framed this, I have the really dark gorge wall in the background. It helps to separate this bright foreground and me ahead. So you can use that within your images however you want to frame that, but just know that that dark background is basically there. This is where a polarizer really comes in handy because that ambient light is going to want to hit those gorge walls and reflect off of it. So when you have a polarizer, it just cuts that reflection right out and really gives you a nice dark backdrop so that you can use to separate your subject. Okay guys, so my fourth and final tip is to be creative. focus in on the gorge walls and the natural curves and details that it has, and just go with that off pure feeling. Just be creative with your compositions and don't focus so much on the fundamental things that I spoke about earlier, like light and separation or scale. Just look at what looks interesting and try to get creative with your compositions and just have fun with it. You'd be really surprised at how lost you can get just sitting in a gorge, trying to come up with creative different compositions and images. So that's my final tip, just be creative and have fun. Which I know that kind of sounds like a cop-out, like, oh, just be creative and have fun, but honestly, when you get into a gorge, the different features of the rocks and details, you can really come up with some creative things. So that's my fourth and final tip, just be creative, try to have fun with it, and don't focus too much on what works compositionally or the light or such things. Just get creative. Okay guys, so that's everything for today's video. I hope you guys found today's video informative or valuable in some sort of way. Those are my 4 tips for photographing at a gorge. The first one was scale, second one was using the ambient light to your advantage, third one being using the gorge walls, the dark gorge walls, as a background or separation to your subject, and the fourth one just being creative with your compositions and the images that you get from the actual gorge walls themselves, because you know there's a lot of detail and a lot of cool shapes and forms in them. So I just think it's a really good opportunity to get creative and walk away with some creative images. So hopefully you guys found this useful. If you did like the video, then give it a thumbs up. It's quick and easy for you, but it really helps me out in promoting my channel. If you like the content and the other videos I have, then feel free to subscribe to the channel. Again, it's quick and easy, free for you to do, but it really helps me out. So yeah, that's everything for today's video. Just 4 quick tips for photographing in a gorge, and I hope to see you guys in the next video.